Let me tell you a story. When I started college, I learned that my university spent an awful lot of money on a highly trained and carefully recruited wrestling team. The university was really proud of it. They invested in it heavily every year. They still do. They're still very proud of it. The new wrestlers who arrived each year out of high school quickly realized a few things. They were very disoriented when they first got there. It didn't take them long to realize that they knew they were really strong, and then to find out that they were way above average strong. In high school, they were these scrawny little kids until they started putting on muscle. And they won some local matches. Then they were noticed by recruiters. They were invited to join the really big boys at college with full scholarships. And when they arrived, they found out that now they really were big boys too, and pretty special, and they were treated in a very special way. The red carpet was rolled out at their private dorm, which was really nice. They got whatever they wanted. They got specialized training. They got all the food they wanted, specialized food that they wanted. They got a better weight room with heavier weights. And they were welcomed into this tiny fraternity of men who had more muscle per gram of body weight than any other segment of about 30,000 people on that campus. So when they hung out together in groups of about half a dozen or so and would wander around and rove around the campus, they represented in their little group enough combined strength to physically defeat any other group of guys, big groups of guys, 15 or 20 average guys anywhere, especially those who might be getting a beer on a Friday night. So at least theoretically, that was the idea. So did they test the theory? Of course they did. They had to test the theory. You had better believe they tested that theory. And then they validated the theory every single new school year, proving that they were far more proficient at hand-to-hand combat than any unsuspecting group in our university town. And so, if you can imagine this, in the name of fraternal bonds, a little bit of scientific experimentation, they set off on many Friday nights and many Saturday nights to find a group of chumps who had no idea that under the jackets of these wrestlers was hidden more available masculine strength per cubic centimeter than in any other gang of bar hoppers. And so the evening would start, I'm sure you can imagine it, with the slinging of these clever verbal insults back and forth. And then it would start, and then it would be all over in about 3 minutes of highly gratifying violence, gratifying for the wrestlers. Again and again, one fight was not enough per night. They just would keep going to these different clubs, club after club. The wrestlers gained the satisfaction of proving to one another and a few onlooking females that they certifiably did have a formidable arsenal of muscles. And if you want to talk about body fat, the entire team, there was probably 1 or 2 grams combined. But what I want to talk about is moral wisdom. Did they have any? And it turned out, on the whole team, none. And so once all the chumps in town wisened up and realized that they couldn't fight these guys, the fights stopped. The wrestlers were bored, and one night they went out to burn off some testosterone. What did they do? They ended up in the country, and they raped some poor farmers' farm animals. Now, the university found out about it, the university covered it up, and the coach put the lid on these late-night rumbles and put an end to it. So what was behind all this zeal? To go out and prove all this misdirected masculinity. It started, in my opinion, and I got to know some of these guys, it started out as a desire to prove that they could work together as a team, which they could. A desire, because in wrestling, it's just one-on-one against your opposing team member. You don't get to do team sports, but wow, they could do team fighting. And they had this desire that they could prove themselves superior in a real fight, a team fight. The desire to prove themselves in a real-world battle instead of some supervised scuffle on a gymnasium mat, which was really nothing but a game. They wanted to demonstrate real-world superiority against human opponents who had real-world strength and real-world response times. And it really is too bad they didn't have an ounce of wisdom among themselves to figure out something better to do than this. They were simply willing to disturb the peace for no other reason than to prove that they could. And this is some of what we're seeing in the so-called Boogaloo movement. A little bit of zeal, some teamwork, not a whole lot of teamwork. There's a lot of disorganization. But there is a lot of strength and personal firepower, meaning guns. And I don't mean this kind of gun, I mean this kind of gun. But what about maturity and wisdom? You give a gun to an immature man, he can go one of two directions. He can go forward into responsible manhood, or he can go backward into pillow fantasy boyhood, imagining that he has unlimited ammo, that everything in the world is a target. And how many Boogaloo boys on the scene today in the United States made a wrong turn backward into childhood? And are we dealing with that kind of foolishness in childhood right now? Here we are. Where are we in history? Right now in the developed world, both the disarmed world, meaning Europe, Western Europe, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, they've been disarmed. You guys in the United States still have the privileges of being armed. And all of the world, all of the Western world, needs wisdom and responsible adulthood right now. And a few responsible adults with some firepower, of course, is a bonus in a situation where there is a crisis. And certainly Boog boys can hang more firepower from their chest rigs and their slings and their war belts than any other Americans per cubic inch of body weight, right? They are formidable, we the people wannabes. But what is that exactly? What do they want exactly? A little disturbance of the peace just to prove that they can do it? A little bit of hand-to-hand combat with other pugnacious Americans? A civil war with Antifa and the cops who support Antifa? What do they want? Now let me speak to you Boogaloo boys very directly. You and I both know we do have a crisis on our hands. And it's different than it was last year. There is an organized insurrection going on right now. It's getting violent. People who say they are anti-fascist and anti-racist are using race and fascist politics as excuses to attack innocent people. Law and civility and the economy are not just falling apart. They're being torn apart by revolutionaries. And you guys are angry. I get that. I understand that. I know that. But misdirected violence will not open an imaginary door to liberty and justice. Getting a tattoo that says, kill them all and let God sort them out, does not make you a modern-day heroic Minuteman. Dying in your front yard in a blaze of glory while wearing your Hawaiian shirt and facing down a SWAT team will not inspire anyone to patriotism. It's not part of the solution. If you are serious about being part of a real solution, about being a lawful member of the constitutional unorganized militia, which is a legal thing, you had better get oriented to the nature of authority, the hierarchy of authority, and the architecture of the authority structure in your own state. And you've got to invest some time in this to study it, and some energy in this to study it, getting you and your buddies situated legally within that structure. And after you educate yourselves, you can tell others what you've learned. And here's where you can start. Check out this 10 U.S. Code, Section 246. This is the law that's on the books, and you need to know about that, and so do other people. So teach others, including your governor, what you've learned about the purpose of a properly regulated local militia and the governor's duties to deploy it in the proper constitutional situations. If he could do that, if every governor would do that, there would be virtually no insurrection happening on the streets of the United States. Now, if you cannot get a meeting with your governor, just write an intelligent letter as if you were grown up and dependable and really serious about this. So back to this wrestling coach. Who was he dealing with? He was dealing with infants. And he had to tell those young fools, look, you guys need to know how to control your testosterone in ways that are moral and not immoral. And you totally fail. You are totally grounded. And a lot of your Boogaloo friends need to hear a message that's very similar, maybe even the very same message. All that firepower you've got and that they've got must be restrained. It can only be directed in a moral direction. It can only be used lawfully. Or you will make the problem a whole lot worse and know better. Don't be like these Antifa paramilitary groups which are springing up around the nation. And just please stop it with the fantasizing about your own private little civil war. War is hell. If you don't know this, you need to know this. You do not want to bring it on. You want to do everything in your power to avert it. And war can often be averted if every citizen can be responsibly armed, responsibly trained, responsibly restrained to do nothing but to defend against immoral violence in the right way at the right time. So please make sure you are not on the wrong side and have to be cut down by forces with a greater morality, a greater ethic, and a better discipline than you've got. So if it is your desire to attain to the high moral caliber of America's first Minutemen, and that's really what you should be thinking about, look for role models, and those are some of the best in history. Just do what they did. You can do what they did. They trained, yes, in physical ways, but they also trained their intellect. They opened up some books. You can open up books. Read about the ways America's first Minutemen oriented themselves to all the problems of their day, the corrupt politicians, the evil mercenaries, ruining their lives and their nation. They had it worse than we do right now in the early 1770s. These Minutemen and the militiamen, and by the way, every single one of them from teenage age to about age 45 were militiamen, all of them. And they increased their literacy. They studied history. They talked about this brand new book series that was out, Blackstone's Commentaries on the Law. And they read and talked about their Bibles with agile minds. They read the periodicals of the time, the newspapers, and it was mainly newspapers, with editorials, with analysis, with theological arguments. And they had very intelligent conversations about the main issues of liberty and justice, usually down at the local taverns. And they were not simply anti-everything because they were working so hard to build a nation. They were pro-family, pro-constitutional government, pro-local decentralized government, pro-business, pro-free market, pro-rule of law. And they were pro-liberty and justice. And they taught each other what each of those things was. And they also knew the difference between, and this is really important for our day, you've got to know the difference between lawless revolution, which is evil, and disciplined resistance, which is absolutely totally moral and necessary. They wanted nothing to do with the lawless revolution. So they waited. They appealed to the king, King George. They looked at their legal options. And they waited until they knew they were in the right and that there was no way out but war. And then they made a brave start and a quick end to a just war. And then they resumed building the things that were important, their families and their communities. There's no reason that you cannot do the very same thing for the same reasons. And if you want more specifics, just write to me. Please do communicate with me. Ask me any questions you've got. You can contact me at questions@jeffreybotkin.com.